to kick us off, and then I'll chime in, and we can roll from there?
Yeah, I'll just quickly kick us off. Welcome everyone to I should say good morning Lootverse. And
good morning Lootverse.
Good morning Lootverse. Welcome to I think this is Town Square. I should really start counting. I think it's number 13, which is pretty incredible. That we've been doing this for 13, actually more than 13 weeks. But anyway, I think probably have a shorter call today with some just updates from around the Lootverse. We're going to start off with Threepwave and get a Crypts and Caverns update. Very excited about that, and hear about the mint out and the collaboration with Realms. We'll hear from HyperLoot and get some of their updates. I know they shared a awesome 3D teaser yesterday that went a little viral. So excited to hear more about that. Tim Shell and maybe Team, although I don't see, I guess Cam is on here, is going to tell us about Genesis Scrolls and Banners. Yep, Banners Cage. I'm going to tell us about Genesis Scrolls and where that cross Lootverse, lore writing contest is at. And then if Kai is on, we'll maybe get a Explorers update, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And actually, we have something that Aglas Solali. I'm going to keep butchering that name. I'll just say G. I think you said call you G, so we'll just say G is going to share some stuff he's been working on. I think including like this sort of visual kind of vibe board for the meta timeline. And did I miss anyone? I don't think I missed anyone. So let's start with Crypts and Caverns. Good morning, Three.
Good morning. Sorry, I just decided that I didn't want to wake my neighbors up. I was going to sit outside. My in-laws are over, so probably TMI. But just moved my setup inside. Give me a second to get my screen set up here, and then I will get moving.
Oh, sorry, Tim Shell. I completely cut out your intro.
Oh, you're good. We're going to have plenty of my voice, as always.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe Tim could give his 10-second intro while I turn on my screen.
Maybe someone needs to learn how to do a server mute on Tim Shell here. Sure, I'll do a 10-second intro. I love that this is recorded on a podcast now, so I got to put my podcast voice on. This is what I wanted to say. I say this, most of these Loot Town Squares, but if this is your first Loot Town Square, here's what this is. This is a show and tell for loot builders. This is a launch pad for loot ideas, so open discussions about loot ideas. In a way, this is an all-hands for the loot community, and it's a decentralized and async all-hands. So if you're on the call now, you're having the synchronous version of it, but these podcasts and recordings and the YouTube share of this or whatever often get hundreds or thousands of people watching it, so welcome to the Loot all-hands. But this has also become kind of a stand-up for the Hyperverse at large. Something bigger than Loot. Loot is an idea. Loot is a inspiration, and Loot has become a community that cuts even beyond the Lootverse. And so this call each week sometimes expands out to again like being a stand-up for the Hyperverse. This decentralized, permissionless, on-chain, sort of composable, vibrant alternative to maybe Facebook's metaverse is the way at least I think about the Hyperverse. And each week here, if you have something to share that you're working on that fits that concept and that spirit, please do share it. Everybody here obviously loves Loot and is building inside of Loot, but is also everybody here contains multitudes. Everyone's working across the ecosystem, whether that's in Loot adjacent stuff and DOM adjacent stuff like corruptions, Blitmap, etc., or whether that's your own projects or just stuff you're seeing that you want to give +1s and shout outs to. This call here can start with Loot, obviously, and can focus on Loot. And usually there's plenty of time, an hour, almost 2 hours of Loot stuff. But we really do want to make time for wider Hyperverse discussion. So if anyone on this call here just wants to share what you're working on towards the end, just unmute yourself or pop into the general channel and raise your hand. So welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. I think this is my second time on, so I'm going to do a brief introduction. Andrew, do you remember, was I first on in November or December? I was trying to remember. I know it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was, gosh, I think you were probably on like episode 3 or something.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, great. So it's been a while. I was like referencing all these different dates in my talk last night, and I realized I had no idea. My sense of time is lost because I just had a kid. So anyway, for those who are not familiar, I am here to talk about Crypts and Caverns. Crypts and Caverns is a collection of 9,000 on-chain generative dungeon maps. And the goal of Crypts and Caverns, or the vision, however statement you want to attach to it, is to provide a sense of place in the Lootverse. And so I'm going to talk today about what's changed since we were here last. I'm going to start with a brief introduction of Crypts and Caverns, and then as mentioned, I'm going to talk about our long-term plan and how our new Realms integration fits into that. So just a second about me. My name's Threepwave. My background is primarily in virtual reality, game development, and world building. And world building, I haven't clarified this, but for me means building 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional worlds that you can inhabit as a person, as opposed to the more literary definition, which is creating amazing worlds out of your words in the vein of someone like a George R.R. Martin, etc. I found crypto in 2021. I was super late to the game, so I've been trying to catch up since. And this is my first Solidity project, which is a terrible choice for a first project because it's so freaking complicated. But that's just a bit about me and how I got here. So I'm going to do a quick refresher of what I covered last time. For those who were here before, you can glaze over for the next 2 minutes. But I think we have some new viewers, and for me it was just helpful to go back and remember what did we say beforehand when Crypts and Caverns had just launched, because we are now a few months out. And so from my perspective, to make a game in the Lootverse, or using Loot, we need 3 high-level concepts. We need people, which is how do you find people to adventure with? Who are those people? How do they represent themselves, whether it's in 2D land, 3D land, text land, etc. Then we need places, like where do we go to do things together? Where do we explore? Where do we gather? Where do we hang out? Where do we spend time with the people we care about? Right now we kind of have this Discord, and we have realms. So what does that future of places look like? And then finally, you need items or things. These are the activities you can do together. These are the places that you can visit. When you go visit a place, it's just like, do you walk in the door and do you get a pint of ale? When you walk out the door, do you go fight a dragon, etc.? What do you do? And within each of these categories, there's a subset of modules or components or features that needs to be built and could exist in order to make a thrilling or a compelling game or a compelling world. And when I looked at this list when Loot first launched, there were a lot of people looking at the people side of things, the avatars, what do NPCs look like, etc. And Loot obviously defined some weapons up front. And really there was only, I think, realms at the time. And if you fast forward in the places category, and if you fast forward to now, we actually have each of these categories is starting to get fleshed out, which is really cool. And I suspect if I took some more time, I could actually make a little map and map it to this little framework, and you start to see that there's a lot of groups working on each of these sections here. And I actually expect over time that we are going to slowly shift to the right, meaning that today a lot of people are focused on avatars and figuring out how you show up. We've talked about a couple of those projects. There's Loot Explorers, there's HyperLoot, etc. How do I show up in this world? And Realms and Crypts and Caverns are starting to lead the way on the places, and I'm sure there are other projects working on that. But I think over time, once those two kind of foundations are established, you're going to see more and more groups like the Crypt come online and try to do activities and things to do together. So I'm really excited about this kind of like broader landscape of the Lootverse and how it's starting to come together, because we're starting to actually have things we can do. If you look back a couple months ago, you couldn't do anything. You could just like collect some NFTs and you hope they go up or down or something. And now you can try to mint a Genesis you could mint a Genesis venture. You can go in and you can try to solve a dungeon in the Crypts, and I think we're going to have more and more activities come online soon, which I'm really excited about. So for me, when I looked at this kind of broader framework, I thought, you know what, the place is where I have experience. I thought I would share some new things on this call. So one thing that most people don't know is that from 5th grade to 8th grade, I pretty much did no work in school. I actually just sat down every day and drew out Quake maps. I was so inspired by the game Quake that I would sit there every day in most of my classes and draw out maps, and then at night I would make them and build them. And when I would go on trips to other cities and whatnot, I would look at the architecture, the layout of buildings and whatnot, because I've always been fascinated about this concept of like, how do people inhabit these spaces? And as I've grown older and moved into things like virtual reality, I think about how do we craft spaces that encourage people to come together, that encourage people to play together, to talk together. There's a reason that the yoga studio starts off with a counter where you meet the receptionist. You don't just walk into the yoga class when it's in the middle of it. There's a reason you walk into a locker room, both from a nudity standpoint, but also because that's actually a place where you start to ground yourself and get ready. And then you walk into the yoga studio and you do yoga, and when you walk out, you go back into that same locker room where you've now experienced something with someone. And that's a shared space where you can all talk and gather and meet, and you start to make friends or longer-term acquaintances because you saw them do something in this yoga class, maybe you have something in common. And so thinking about how the different places fit together has been something I've always been passionate about, and I'll continue to be a strong advocate for, which is being very thoughtful about how we assemble places within the Lootverse. So if we dig into places, if you create a game, if you create an experience that's 3D, your default is like a gray or black void. And I think that it is possible that Loot and all our experiences could live in an empty void. To me, that's quite sad, but that would be the default experience. And so what I've been thinking about a lot is, what do these experiences start to look like? Whether they're some crazy 3D metaversey thing, or a simple 2D game, or a text-based adventure. And the foundation that we need are walls and floors. A place where you can walk, a place where you can't walk, a place where you can fly, a place where you can't fly. The basic boundaries that start to assemble a space. And so that is what I've been trying to tackle with Crypts and Caverns. So my approach was to start with walls and a floor. So if you take the Zelda map, you would start to flesh this out. You would say, okay, we have different walls defined. There are floor tiles, and I represent those here with ones. You then have wall tiles where you can't walk. I'll represent those with zeros. And regardless of most games you're playing, they may not use ones and zeros, but most experiences have some concept of walls and floors mapped out in a data structure like this. And my next step was to then say, okay, let's just add a little bit of flavor on top. Let's make these a little bit interesting. Let's put something like a door in place, so you can travel to different areas. Perhaps it's a door it's a boulder, and you have to break it to move forward. And then let's put something like an object you can interact with. I call it a point of interest. It could be, in this case, a little shrub you can burn to unlock something new. It could be a shrine. It could be a boss encounter, etc. And so if you look at this picture, even though it uses Zelda, which everyone's familiar with, this is basically what Crypts and Caverns does. It generates a bunch of maps like this on-chain. So there is no human input. It's all coming from an algorithm. There's a couple different ways that I do that. One is to put a bunch of rooms in place and connect them with hallways, and another is to kind of burrow what we call caverns, or tunnels, out of the walls. But you end up with something like this, which a game developer can then take, and whether you have the Loot Explorer style, or whether you have the Crypt style, or the HyperLoot style, or a new style we're not aware of, like, they can add their own look and feel on top of these basic data structures. So I am not telling you have to use my pixel art. I'm just suggesting that there's a set of walls and floors and some other things, and it'd be cool if you use those. So this is roughly what an on-chain map looks like, and this is what Crypts and Caverns delivered. And so, as I mentioned, I aim to provide a sense of place in the Lootverse, and my hope is that as we add these maps, and as people traverse these maps, and game developers add them in, you start to feel a sense of continuity as you move between these spaces that might exist across 4 or 5 different Lootverse experiences. And if you recognize, let's say, a legendary place like Oblivion from one game, you might start to recognize that same place, at least the core structure of it, across another game. And so I think this is a great way to make the experiences feel cohesive. I know that we're talking a lot about lore. We're trying to push boundaries on the visual language of Loot. We're trying to talk about what are the core canonical constructs of. But this is another way, whereas you start to experience these places across a number of different games, it starts to feel like home. It starts to feel familiar. It starts to feel friendly. And so I'm excited to get Crypts and Caverns into as many Loot projects as possible. So if you remember, last time I was here, I put this crazy idea forward that you could link maps together. And I teased what was basically just a fun idea at the time, like, hey, what if Realms was like the world map for the Lootverse? And these Crypts and Caverns maybe lived in different areas of the Realms, or they were elsewhere, and you could traverse them from your realm. We could connect them together. And once we started talking with the Realms team, I think my first interaction with Realms, I went to pitch Lord of a Few, and he said, cool, rewrite your entire contract in Cairo. See you later. I was like, damn, Oh man, okay, that's a lot of work. I just want to get this. I just put this contract together. Maybe we can talk in a little while. And so I was a little discouraged at first, but once we got to talking further, it actually started to make a lot of sense to bring Crypts and Caverns to Realms, because Realms gives you a great high-level view of the map, and there are places defined, but each of those places doesn't really have a definition yet. We know that there are resources in each realm, but we don't know what happens when you dive a little deeper. And so I'm excited to dive a little deeper into Realms. We've announced our partnership, which basically led to my collection getting minted out in a crazy 18-hour period. And I wanted to talk just a very little bit today about what we're going to do with Realms, because I'm super excited about this, and it's how I'm spending almost all of my time right now. So the first thing to know is that Realms is made up of a bunch of different modules. There are crafting modules, questing modules, etc. And Crypts and Caverns will be the first module we bring to Realms. So the idea is that your dungeons are going to be tightly integrated into the Realms codebase. I am currently actively working with a developer named Milan to port Crypts and Caverns to StarkNet and bring those over. They will still live on Layer 1, but you will be able to access your Crypts and Caverns from Layer 2. And they will be accessible within Realms. So you'll be able to, they will fit into the Realms universe. This is not just a reference an NFT and generate a few tokens and bam, it's an integration, we're all done. This is a very deep integration where we're trying to make Crypts and Caverns a core part of the Realms experience. And so you can see this, for example, in the item table. These are placeholder or example items, but you could imagine special items that you can only get from a dungeon becoming available in Realms, which is the current plan. You could also imagine those items being combined with other existing Realms items like Dragonhide or Coal, etc., to create new craftable items and new consumable items and new things to use within the Realms universe. And so we're still defining what these items are. We think we have a pretty good sense of what they should be. We haven't shared them out yet, so it probably won't be a Dark Crystal and a Death Shard and Demon Skull. But I'm really excited about this as the first step to bringing the Crypts and Caverns and Realms universes together. And for Crypts and Caverns holders, it means that they have a unique way to participate in the Realms ecosystem. You could get to generate these resources and sell them all right away, convert them to ETH, and go along your merry way. But I'm actually excited for bringing new users to Realms, new players who may not already have a realm, may not be able to afford a realm, but still have a way to participate in that ecosystem, which I think is really, really cool. So the three kind of like high-level bullet points I'd love for you to take away about Crypts and Caverns and Realms working together. Your dungeons will be available on StarkNet. Your dungeons are going to generate rare resources and items that you cannot get from other ways. So this will be the way to generate these rare resources. And third is that this is not just a quick integration. I am planning to spend most of my foreseeable future working on this integration to make sure that we are tightly integrated, to make sure that when you interact with the Crypts and Caverns in Realms, it's really fun. Because I believe that from a Realms standpoint, they don't just need developers to come in and slap modules and walk away. They need developers to think thoughtfully and to work with their game designers to make sure that everything fits together as a cohesive system. And I think this is a pattern you're going to see across the Lootverse going forward is builders are starting to work together. We're starting to come together and realize that if back in December, maybe in November, we were all building on our own, our experiences are all better when we work together. And taking advantage of that composability and these shared goals that we have, you're going to start to see more and more experiences come together like this. And I'm really excited to show what a really great integration can look like with Realms. And I'm also excited for Crypts and Caverns because if we show a great integration here, more and more projects are going to want to work with us. The reality is you can take these on-chain dungeon maps or Creative Commons Zero, you can slap them into your project no matter what. You don't have to talk to me. But I think that if we show a really compelling, interesting gameplay experience, that you'll start to see more projects come and seek us out and say, hey, we like what you did with Realms. What could our version of that look like? And we're already talking to a project called Tiny Kingdoms that is in a similar place where they want to do something interesting around maps. Emre, who is the founder of Tiny Kingdoms, came to me early on, and we're starting to build a gameplay experience together from the brainstorming stage. So for people who are collecting Crypts and Caverns or thinking about it, I would encourage you to look at this as a longer-term hold. This is not a project that's going to moon overnight. In fact, I suspect it's going to fluctuate dramatically until we start introducing Realms rewards. But it is a way to get upside long-term into a lot of different games, I hope. And then from a builder perspective, if you're interested in maps, come talk to me in the Discord. I would love to hear ideas and things that you're working on, because I am happy to brainstorm. I'm happy to write code. I am happy to work together. I want to add value to your project and not just have this be a module that you just copy paste in and you never talk to our team. So this is a summary of Crypts and Caverns and Realms working together. I tried to boil it down to be incredibly simple. I'm going to really quickly talk about the Crypts and Caverns long-term plan, because I know Tim said let's not go over 2 hours this time, but I have a couple more slides to walk through. And first of all, I just want to really quickly thank Decipher, who's a community member of Crypts and Caverns, who put together this awesome layout of all these dungeons, and much more impressive than my original pixel art by itself does. So let's talk long-term about what the Crypts and Caverns plan and roadmap looks like. This is a question I get a lot. A lot of teams come out the door and promise this kind of roadmap that's like, we're going to have all this stuff, and we're going to make a PFP, and then we're going to make a game, and then we're going to make pets, and there's going to be breeding those pets, and there's going to be a token, and use the token to breed the pets, and then do the PFP and all this. And I'm of the mindset that you should set a really, really simple plan in place that you know you can execute, and then the variable is, do people actually want what we're building? Not, can we build as many things as possible? And I'm also of the mindset that you should start out with a very small promise and work from there, and not try to promise the world from day one. So when I think about the Crypts and Caverns plan, we mentioned that the goal is to provide a sense of place for the Lootverse. One day I hope that it expands beyond the Lootverse, as Tim was mentioning, whether it's the Hyperverse, whatever else we call these things. I would love for projects like Cool Cats, projects like Crypto Coven, who are building out their land right now, to start integrating, or chain runners maybe, to start integrating these maps. But today I'm narrowly focused on the Lootverse, focused on Realms. So step 1 is to provide high-quality dungeon maps. We've done that. It's hard to use them right now. It's hard to integrate them. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So that's what I'm working on today. Step 2 is to integrate tightly with gameplay systems, to make sure that when we go to a project, they have a reason to work with Crypts and Caverns. And that reason is we're going to help them level up their thinking on gameplay, their thinking on what you can do on-chain. We have a game designer on staff. We have engineers on staff and people who are going to help with that. And I think that we can add a lot of value to projects if we do this well, by not just thinking of ourselves as a white label you toss in. And finally, we're going to reward holders with the tokens and the items from each game. We have 2 models that we're thinking about. Model number 1 is that the holders get unique items and resources like you see in Realms. And another model is that perhaps if a game doesn't want to generate new items and resources, that perhaps when someone visits a dungeon and there's some reward that they get, like let's say they get 15 gold, perhaps we could carve off 0.1% of that gold to a dungeon holder, similar to how something like a Uniswap or a Sushi Swap could work. So there's different ways you can get rewarded for holding a dungeon. But this is our high-level plan. It probably sounds really simple. That is on purpose. There's a reason that Tesla's plan was something like build expensive sports car, build cheaper sports car, make electricity really cheap, and profit over time, and then go to Mars or something like that. I tried to boil it down to be super, super simple, because I think these are steps we can actually hit and we can actually make happen. And so just to give a quick visual of what this could look like, imagine those are your fat stack of dungeons on the left, if you have a few. You would then stake those dungeons. So we're working right now on a staking contract that sits on L1. When your dungeon is staked, you would then start to earn tokens, resources, etc. from the games that are integrated with Crypts and Caverns. In some cases, you might have to do something to earn those tokens. It may be you need to go upkeep your dungeon. You may need to go outfit your dungeon with different things. It may be that for some experiences, the tokens just flow through, and it just happens. You don't have to do anything. And then you can claim those rewards. So again, it's a super simple value proposition. And I hope that people are excited about this. I look at this as kind of like an index fund for on-chain games. You don't necessarily have to play all the games yourself. You can own the dungeon, and you can then earn rewards across a number of different games as they become more successful. And so that was our high-level plan. Our roadmap is really simple. Step 1, we are going to enable staking so that you can place your dungeon, say this is not going anywhere, and game developers can rely on it. That allows us to bring it to other chains like Starknet, Arbitrum, Optimism over time. Next, we're going to make the Realms integration freaking awesome. We're going to do everything we can, myself included, to make sure that the Crypts and Caverns, when they show up in Realms, look great, feel great, have a cool experience. You have fun playing them, and you think, wow, I'd like to do that again. And then step 3, we're going to do that again with more projects. And I think that if we can do this over and over again well, that is when you'll see Crypts and Caverns become a long-term successful project. And so that's kind of my long-term view and what I'm thinking about over time. So that's the plan. I want to really quickly thank the team. So we actually have a team now. It's very small. Dark Sheep is one of our moderators and early community members who has been awesome at both keeping the conversation going, keeping the crazies out, banning all the bots, and also giving me great suggestions behind the scenes. Ira Fudmore, who was a very early contributor, almost the first day I talked about Crypts and Caverns, is focusing on game design for the Realms integration. Jaffo is another great moderator who is also banning bots and working behind the scenes to kick a bunch of people. So if you see Crypts and Caverns Discord isn't crazy, thank you, Jaffo, and for Dark Sheep. And then Milan is a core lord, but is also helping out with bringing Crypts and Caverns over to Cairo. And he's been super awesome at schooling me on how to write Cairo, helping with architecture, and making sure that our dungeons show up well in StarkNet and are easy to use for developer. Thank you, team. I really appreciate you. So, just quick summary. Since we were last here, we sold out. Thank you to all of our holders. We have 8,784 dungeons live right now. We announced our partnership with Realms. We're brainstorming our partnership with Tiny Kingdoms. We are working on staking in StarkNet. I shared some fun stats on the right. A not so fun stat is that 2 bugs, which I'm embarrassed about, but luckily they are not breaking bugs. So we burned 11 broken dungeons, and we have a mix-up in our OpenSea metadata that is being ironed out now. And there are 17 legendary dungeons minted, which I'm excited about. I was a little worried that someone would flashbot the mint and just come up with 8,700 legendaries, and it would just ruin the whole collection. But it worked great, and people are collecting those. So this is my quick summary of Crypts and Caverns. If you want to learn more, you can go to 3pave.com/Crypts and Caverns. That is the website. You can get to our Discord, our Twitter, etc. from there. Again, we're trying to provide a sense of place in the Lootverse, and my hope is that over time that becomes a sense of place in the Lootverse and beyond. And other projects that are not in Loot come together, and we can start linking this thing together to become the true kind of hyperverse that Tim alluded to. So thank you. Appreciate everyone letting me take the time.
Man, how do we even follow that, Three?
Yeah, that's so amazing.
I love what you're working on, and I love your energy. Something you said a couple of minutes ago I wanted to put a pin on, because I know that you embody this spirit. As you're talking about Realms, you're saying things like, as they design their game, as they look for builders, as they think about their future. And what struck me is that we are they. In the Lootverse, I think that concept of we are they really cuts deep and really lives at the foundation of this universe. And what you're doing here, integrating with Realms, and what Genesis and Realms and Loot and Realms and Loot Explorers and Genesis and HyperLoot and OG Loot and Genesis, what we're doing is we're weaving a foundational baseline for an entire Loot universe to thrive. And so what I love is that across the board, like, there is no they. We are they. Like, we are Realms. Realms is Loot. Crypts and Caverns is Loot. I feel a sense of ownership and responsibility, and I think a lot of this community does too, for all of our projects. And that's also something pretty amazing about just Web3 and about the fact that these are NFTs, not just game elements, that quite literally we do co-own these projects together. And so I just wanted to call it out. Threep, I know you embody that spirit, but it felt like an important moment there.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's funny because Lord and I have been talking in chat, and the way we talk about our work is not as 2 teams. We talk about it as 1 team, even just Crypts and Caverns, and then he was even like, hey, should we just call this 1 team? Should we just formally merge everything together? Because I totally look at the world that way, and I'm always excited when I see new people pop up on this call, whether they be people who are just excited about Loot, people who have just collected their first Loot or M-Loot or something else in Lootverse, or even just the new builders that show up, because they start to come into the fold and they start to just become active in all these different conversations. And it does really feel like there's a group of people working together. I do agree with you. I love that you called it we, not they. I think that's a great distinction I'm going to use going forward, because I think this idea of everyone working together to build a Lootverse is the reality that we have today, and we can name that. And that's one of my favorite things about building a community.
Right on. Okay, let's do a pulse check. We're at 8:35. I'm going to talk Genesis Scrolls. We've got...
Let's go. We got to go HyperLoot. They got to, because they have a call.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's go HyperLoot, and then I'll do Genesis Scrolls after. Perfect. And is Kai on yet? No, I don't see Kai. So why don't we go HyperLoot and then Genesis Scrolls and then open it up?
Hey, thank you very much, Tim, Shell, and Andrew, for trying to adjust the time for us. And for today, we have it's not going to be a really big update. We just want to say hi to everyone and talk about what we've been working on. So let us share our screen.
3, I think you're still sharing there.
Thank you.
Nice. Cool.
Okay. I think our screen is showing right now, right?
I'm not seeing it, but maybe others are.
Yeah, it's working for me. See it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so first of all, we are a 3-person team, 2 developers and 1 artist. We've been working on HyperLoot since September, so it's almost 5 to 6 months now. And for people who don't know about HyperLoot yet, we're going to go give a really short intro. As you see in this diagram, Loot is the first layer, and HyperLoot is going to be the building block on top of Loot. So we're going to be the second layer, which we call it the visualization layer. We are going to provide the 2D assets and 3D assets that will be able to visualize your loot bags. We are going to support Loot, More Loot, and Genesis Adventurers. Then we're going to use these assets to build our third layer, which is going to be the application layer. And while we are building the application layer, we're going to provide the assets library like SDKs or any APIs needed for other builders to be able to build on top of HyperLoot as well. So this means that new builders can come in to join the Lootverse. They can build on top of Loot itself. That's totally fine. If they need assets, if they have a very good idea of a game, or they have a really good lore written, then they can use HyperLoot as their visualization layer to build whatever they want on the application layer. So HyperLoot is going to be CC0. We are going to be open source. Anything that you see, it's going to be available for the public to use as well. So that's HyperLoot. And this is our NFT. We are going to have Loot, More Loot, and Genesis Adventurer able to mint HyperLoot using their bags. So it's going to be a 1-to-1. For loot holders, they won't have a time limit to mint yet. It depends on the community later on. So 1 loot bag can mint 1 HyperLoot. It's going to be a direct item transfer. So if you're holding a long sword, then your HyperLoot will also be holding a long sword. It also works for More Loot and for Genesis Adventurers as well. So we did a little twist for loot holders and More Loot to show a little difference. It's going to be the ring on top of HyperLoot's head. There's a slight art difference that you'll be able to visualize. So when you actually look at all the HyperLoots, the rings are going to be a little different. So you'll be able to visualize, oh, this is actually HyperLoot built from the loot bag, or it's from the More Loot bag. That's how we wanted to give a little special something to the loot owners. We are planning to go live about in a week or 2. We haven't announced the exact date yet, but we will soon. We don't want to hurry and push the date out first because there might be a delay and we don't want to keep changing dates. And we got a lot of attention with our concept game art that we are planning to build on top of our HyperLoot second layer, which is the CCO War. This is just a concept art for now. We are having a lot of different ideas of what games we want to build on top. But we wanted to show the power of CC0, and we wanted to show what can be done, what can be built on top of HyperLoot, and what can be collaborated between other CC0 projects as well. So using this idea, we are going to build something fun and want to make sure it's very enjoyable. And some people might be worried that there might be, like, there are 8,000 loot pass, there's going to be a capped supply of HyperLoot. We might not have enough users, but for our assets, we can generate all the M-Loot bags without any limit. So our assets are separated into different items. They can do all the different combinations without any problem. It will be generatable, and we can also have like free user. We can have like token-based users who hold their HyperLoot. They can use their HyperLoot to play the game, or if they don't have a HyperLoot, but they have a loot bag, they can play it as a loot, or if they have a noun, they can play it as a noun. If they don't have any of these, then we can also generate maybe a very bare bone of the HyperLoot with body, just to let the user feel the game. So there are different ideas that we have, and this is just one that we got a lot of love. And we just recently tweeted the 3D art, which is the very first iteration, and we really love it. So we really wanted to share it, and we are very happy that it seems like others also love our direction as well. And then we have, so just to give a diagram picture of how we are starting our game design is that Loot, we start with Loot. We are working on HyperLoot, which is built on top of Loot, and our game will be bringing all the CC0 projects into one world or one game. And just more concept art, more design that we are working on. So we might seem a little quiet, but we are really building behind the scenes. We have a lot of ideas going on as well. And so for today, we just wanted to drop by and tell a little about what we are working on, but we're also open to questions as well, as I think there might be some people who are curious about us or about the project. So yeah, if you have anything, you can ask us now.
Does that frog have power to control a swarm of flies? Is that what that is? It's so cool.
But we haven't nailed down the details of the game yet. We just throw a bunch of concept. We actually have more concept games that we draw out, and then we try to visualize which one is the best one. We just try it out right now. We haven't wrote out the storyline, the game mechanism, and stuff like that yet. So it's more of the exploration stage of the game design right now. Right now we are focusing on nailing down the launch of the NFT, and as you can see, the 3D version, we are also working on that as well. So the game will come a little after that.
HyperLoot team, I just have to say this is freaking incredible. I know we've been saying that every few weeks for the past 5 months now, but this is it's incredible. In NFT land, sometimes stuff just moves so fast that it's what's happening today? What's happening tomorrow? Oh, this Discord has been quiet for 5 days. The project must be dead. In real life, with real companies or development projects, to do something at this level of advancement and this level of care and production quality in 5 months. 5 months from when a random contract on Etherscan was dropped and we all came together through the mist and met each other and said, hey, we're inspired to go build here. To do this in 5 months is just outstanding. So congratulations to everybody. I know I'm sitting here with a pile of M-Loot ready to mint. But most excitedly, I'm excited to mint my Genesis Adventures. This is just incredible stuff, so congratulations.
Thank you. We're excited to see what everyone is going to mint as well, because we have no idea which M-Loot people are going to mint, if any, all the loot owners are going to mint or not. And then
we also have the customizable traits, which are the face, the eye, the background, and the left hand, where people can pick what they want on the HyperLoot. they might pick something that they want, or maybe they want to pick something that go well with the theme of the items, of how things look like on the HyperLoot. So we are super excited to see what people will build with us.
Can I ask a meaty question here? And you may not have an answer, but just food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
These are so thoughtful and high quality and precious that talk to me about what happens when, let's say I use a loot bag to mint one, and I custom craft it, it's perfect for me, and it really truly matches my loot bag. And then I sell my loot bag, and somebody else gets that loot bag and says, oh man, I want a HyperLoot character that really emerges from my loot bag. For that next person who's gotten a loot bag where the HyperLoot character is still in somebody else's hands, what's the user experience for that second person who gets a loot bag that I guess has already minted a HyperLoot?
That is a good question. So what we are thinking is that, well, since the HyperLoot NFT and the loot bag is totally detached from each other, right? We're thinking, like, we're trying to come up with a way that allows people who have a loot bag that has already been minted a HyperLoot, and if they want to experience the minting experience and they want to craft their own HyperLoot at later stage, maybe we might even have like a synthetic version of HyperLoot where they can craft it and then you can see what HyperLoot is like, but the ability of the utilities of the synthetic HyperLoot might not be the same with the actual HyperLoot. So that is one of the ideas that we are trying to come up with. But as of now, we are not trying to focus on that since we think that we have a supply of 20,000, which is huge. And I think that problem will come later on, but it's definitely one of the things that we are keeping thinking about.
And we also kind of feel like when you actually minted a HyperLoot that you like, we think you won't really want to sell the loot bag itself. Like you already feel connected to the HyperLoot, and it's actually from that loot bag. Like, would you really want to sell your loot bag?
We are trying to come up with ways to to persuade people to hold both of HyperLoot and the loot bag. Like, maybe in the game, if you hold both HyperLoot and the loot bag, you might get some extra power or something like that, or extra skin, or maybe like you unlock some special stuff if you have both the original loot bag and the HyperLoot. So that is one of the ideas that we are thinking of as well. We are just like trying to pin down all those details right now.
Did loot characters address this somehow with the way that they minted their NFTs?
Yeah, they did it as a... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, loot character didn't allow you to buy or sell their NFT. It's going to follow the loot bag owner, so you can't like transfer it separately. And I think Lootpunk is actually burning their NFT if you sell or if you transfer the loot bag. But we didn't really want to like force HyperLoot with the loot bag itself, because we actually want to give you freedom. Like, if you really want to sell, sure, you can go ahead, but you might lose some utilities or maybe some benefits later on, which is totally up to you.
Yeah, just pointing out that, yeah, totally agree. Just pointing out that I think other projects have done it differently. And yeah, clear that you've looked at the other projects and weighed the pros and cons, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
At a broad level, too, I would say this is an unsolved problem even beyond Loot. Just with the idea of primitives and derivatives and connected projects and sort of collective world building, this is an unsolved problem. But when you use one item to then mint another item that's connected to it, a chain runner and then a chain dreamer, or a lit map and a flip map, or there's so many examples of this. How do those two things stay sort of spiritually aligned or technically aligned over time? Really is an unsolved problem. It's a UX problem as much as it is a technical problem. So I'm glad to throw it at you guys, because I feel like if anybody's going to come up with a really thoughtful solution, it coming out of the HyperLoot team would not only help the Lootverse, but also may end up being a sort of foundational UX model for the rest of the Hyperverse.
Yeah, thank you. We will definitely try to come up with a good idea to that problem for sure.
Mic's open for anybody who wants to react or ask questions here.
Dude, just thought I'd chime in. I think the HyperLoot team's doing an awesome job, and I'm super excited for that. Related to the minting problem with like removing that value from the bag, totally something that we're trying to solve with and taking a stab at it with crystals and how you can continue to create crystals with one bag that grow in power.
Yeah, we're probably due for a Rift update soon, maybe next week.
Perhaps, yeah.
So we are also thinking to maybe like have use the level of the loot bag from the Rift to use as the level inside the game as well if it's gonna work out well. So that's also one technique to actually like let people keep their bags, since the bag itself has the levels that the Rift has been like piling up for the bag. So that we're also thinking to maybe like we can use it as a level in the game as well. So
I really like the art behind HyperLoot. To me, I see probably a game like Smash Bros would work really well. You know, for me with the art, it's really impressive looking. It'd be good fun to play with, I think.
Thank you so much. We work a lot on the art and the design of the character. It was like really tough to design all the items to make sure that they go well together without we are coming from the same set of items. So like all combination of items have to be cohesive. So that took us like a few months to nail down. Thank you a lot for that. We worked really hard for this.
It definitely looks like it. Do you all have a favorite item?
I do have my favorite items, but for me, I like the items that go well together. Like if the HyperLoot has item of dragon skin all the way from top to bottom, that looks really cool for me. And we have some of us we have talked to a few people. Some people might like the color scheme of the item have to go well together. So many people have different opinion on what they like. But I think we try to make sure that all of the items look good regardless of what they are, whether they are divine low or whether they are just a little boot or something like that. We want all of them to look nice. So we don't particularly have one particular hey, this one is the latest one or the best looking one. We want to make sure that all of them look nice.
but we do see a lot of people liking different weapons. Like most people hey, I want to see a book, I want to see long sword, but not really on the chest and the head, but more on the weapons itself. Because people... And so if you have any other questions, our Discord is open. When you drop in, it might seem very quiet, but everyone is really nice. If you drop a question, everyone is very helpful. We've been growing slowly, organically, and we are actually very happy how things are moving on. So I would like to toss the mic to back to Tim Show.
Right on. Thank you for sharing. Andrew, any comments from you?
No, just echoing everyone else. So excited to mint my my actually MLoot, because I was kind of able to because there's so much more be a little more like precise and creative in finding MLoot bags to mint based on some of your work, Tim Shell. So I'm excited to mint those bags.
Also, you won't be minting your loot bag?
No, I will be. I'm just saying, like, my loot bag was just like typing random numbers in and hoping one worked. But with some of the work Tim Shell did in figuring out the MLoot contract and specific characters, I was able to go in and find a full mage character, things like that.
It's actually pretty interesting that there are people who started to actively find a MLoot bag that they actually like. And in the Discord, they're actually asking, what do you think about this bag? What do you think about this bag? And they're actually searching for more loot bags that they think or they believe that is going to look visually nice as HyperLoot. So we totally understand where you're coming from.
I just popped my special Google Sheet into the general channel here.
Ooh, alpha.
Well, MLoot alpha is funny since MLoot is free. But yes, I did spend far too much on gas minting MLoot characters or MLoot bags after discovering this in the contract. There's a set of perfect MLoot bags, and perfect meaning the topmost items across the board. But then there's also a set of full mages, full hunters, full warriors, where all the items are only warrior items or only hunter items or only mage items, and many of them are still mintable. MLoot is about 1.5 million, and I think it expands by maybe 100,000 a year or something like that. And if I remember the math correctly, I think it was that across all 1.5 million MLoot bags, there are about 2,000 sort of full characters of each class. So 2,000 full mages, 2,000 full hunters, 2,000 full warriors. Again, I went wild minting a ton of these and spent way too much gas. The gas gods thanked me. This is not financial advice, though, again, MLoot is free. It's free to mint. Do it at night when gas is low, or do your transactions with low gas. But yeah, hopefully this is just fun for people.
I was going to say that's almost the best part about this is MLoot kind of, to me in many ways, is what loot not should have been, but is what makes loot fun in terms of if people are able to find particular bags that they want. I don't know. It's the opposite of most NFT projects nowadays, right? Where it's a mad dash to mint.
That's true. Because now people are spending more time to find what they actually want to have in their bag. And we are really excited to see how their HyperLoot will look like. Because Tim Shell has a lot of MLoot. We have no idea which MLoot Tim Shell will be minting. And I think everyone will be watching Tim Shell's bag now. How is he going to customize it? What backgrounds is he going to choose? And those stuff as well.
Well, I have this dream of a full demon or full dragon Genesis adventure, which I don't know if it's still going to be possible, but that would be my real dream. Full demon, every item with a demon on it, from demon hide down to demon prefixes on the jewelry. But that would take some insane collaboration to make that happen.
That's going to be really cool, and it's going to be only you.
No, I think El Boogie, I don't think he's on the call, but El Boogie might be one away from the first and maybe only ever full demon Genesis adventure. Anyway, I don't want to take away from the awesomeness of HyperLoot. We are really excited here. Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you for the work that you're doing, too. And this community is definitely going to get behind you when this launches.
And thank you very much for having us.
All right. Do we have a Realms person on the call yet? I guess in some ways I can speak for Realms, but I want a Lord or a Redbeard. It is 3 or 4 in the morning for those guys, so probably not. We'll save Realm for next time, but I'll give the TLDR. Since we last got together, the Realms ecosystem has just gone wild in the best way. Tons of positivity in the Discord, tons of positivity around the ecosystem. The Lord's token is out in the wild, and I think the ups and downs reflect just the normal chaos of the Hyperverse, or the normal chaos of anything with the token. But it's cool to see it happening, and just in general, but the vibe around Realms is incredibly healthy right now. Somebody had mentioned before, like some NFT projects have just a lot of like when mint, whitelist stuff in the Discords, and the Realms community is anything but that. So excited to see how that grows. There's an incredible plan happening around the distillation model to distill bags from L1 to Starknet. And Realms is leading the technical charge on that, which is both sort of a strategic path for the Realms ecosystem, but it's also a public good for the Lootverse. It's something that we'll all be able to build on top of and around and with. I don't want to share too much in terms of detail, but I can just say that the plan is incredibly thoughtful. It ties deeply to the canonical lore of the Lootverse. It emerges from the sort of constraints of the original contract, but also loosens those constraints in ways that allow the game and the ecosystem to be more fun and more fluid, and sort of set up for success for all of us. And yeah, just Realms is having a moment, and like what I said before about we are they. There is no they. We are all building a Lootverse together with the Realms team, and what I'm trying to do to help the Realms team as well. What we're doing, I guess I'll say we. So yeah, what we are all doing within Realms is to build the next foundational sort of technical layer for the Lootverse, similar in spirit to what HyperLoot's doing with sort of the next set of building blocks for visuals and characters. I can definitely see a world where the HyperLoot universe merges into the Starknet Realms universe, and I just can't wait to see that happen. I was actually watching Foundation this week on HBO, and there's something there that really kind of relates to me around the Lootverse. Foundation is obviously more sci-fi, but Foundation has this like rich, diverse universe where you can have a planet that feels like low-tech villages. You can have a planet that's on the water, and you can have a planet or a city in the sky floating with all the technology you can imagine, that all exist in the same universe on the same timeline. And something about that really resonates to me with respect to the Lootverse, and that it is one sort of canonical universe, and it is one timeline that we all live inside of, but with a long enough timeline and a expansive of enough universe, something like HyperLoot in terms of the visuals that we're looking at today can also coexist with the visuals that we're seeing in the Realms world, and can coexist with visuals we're seeing in Loot Explorers, and the timeline, if long enough, can make room for all of that. And so I'm just excited to see it coming together, that instead of like the first couple weeks of Loot was just an explosion of chaos into a million different directions that were unconnected and had nothing to do with each other, what's been happening over the past few months has been the weaving back together of a cohesive yet still infinitely expansive Lootverse, and that just brings me so much joy. It's what really brought me to Loot in the first place, the vision and the what's the word? The calling, I guess. The calling to weave together this collaborative, decentralized world that we can build together. And as each of these projects launches and interplays and works with each other, it's just sort of validating and exciting for me to see that happening. So yeah, great stuff. That was a quick Realms update, plus also just a sort of +1 to what's going on in the ecosystem right now. I think I'll keep the mic, and actually, unless Kai is on yet, from Loot Explorers, no. Nope, okay, I'm going to keep the mic. I want to share two things today. One thing I plan to share, and one thing that I not plan to share, but given the energy on this call and given the people who are on this call, I think I'm just going to share it anyway. So I'm going to share the first thing first, and then I'll share the second thing second. What do you know? Sharing my screen.
That's a good order to go in.
Yeah. So if you know me, you know that I've been working up, down, left, and right in the Lootverse, both in sort of specific directions, but also at the Foundation, and trying to promote projects and promote people and weave together people, and generally just bring the Lootverse to life. I think if you were to say, like, what's Tim Schell's role in the Lootverse, I hope everyone would agree, or at least what I would say about myself, is to help bring the Lootverse to life. through people, through connections, through lore, through foundational building blocks, and even through like just public goods to help this ecosystem grow. So I want to share two things in that spirit today. One medium-sized maybe, and one that I think could be pretty big. But I'll share the medium-sized one here first. So the medium-sized one is this Genesis Scrolls project. If you've heard of Genesis Scrolls before, our original conception of the Genesis Scrolls was going to be a set of 16 descriptions of the 16 orders delivered to us by the Genesis Adventures to help breathe life and describe the meaning of those 16 orders. While that's still true, the vision of the Genesis Scrolls has expanded pretty far beyond that in an exciting way, where it's not just about the stories of the 16 orders, but really the idea here is a public goods project for us to give CCO creative grants to help bring the entire Lootverse to life, starting with the Genesis era of Loot. If you've seen the timeline that I've thrown out before, it's got a couple of epochs, and actually I've evolved those epochs a little bit, but epochs from like pre-Genesis, this unknown past, to the Genesis era, to this like age of exploration, to the Mist, and then from the Mist we discovered 8,000 bags, and you know the path forward in the age that we're in today is like the age of adventure. So there's maybe 3 mega epochs of loot so far. The Genesis Scrolls proposal is a way of saying, why don't we bring the Genesis era to life? And then if it works, let's bring the age of exploration to life with stories. And if that works, let's bring the age of adventure to life with stories. Stories that can be huge, stories that can be small, stories of characters, stories of families, books of poems. I'm going to show some other examples here, like snippets that we found in the past, journals, books, maybe a bestiary. There's so many examples of things that we can create here. The organizing principle, though, is that this is content that does span fact, fiction, myth, and legend, but from the Genesis era of Loot, a set of compelling stories and content that help bring this Lootverse to life. What we're looking at concretely here, though, is me making a proposal to the wider Lootverse, starting with the Genesis project, but then really bringing together all the major Loot projects and more to say, let's do this together. This is not just a project for one Loot extension project. This is a project for all of us. It's a public goods project to bring excitement and intrigue and stories and lore to the Lootverse broadly. So this has started with the Genesis Project DAO. Next, we're bringing this to Divine DAO, which I've been part of as well, in parallel to bring it to Biblioteca and Realms, and we'll put up a proposal there. Once we have those 3 done, then we're going to bring it to Loot DAO, and we'll do a royalty DAO proposal that suggests, hey, Loot, should it... Obviously, the Loot extensions and the Lootverse is working in this direction to create these stories and artifacts and bring the Lootverse to life. But it would be a great, in my opinion at least, it would be a great sign if the Loot holders themselves said, yes, we also want to support this project. Don't just do this for us outside of Loot, but let's actually use the sort of core Loot treasury and the power of Loot itself to help bring this to life as well. So I'm not ready yet to push that proposal. It'll probably be in a week or so. But we did push this proposal to the Genesis Project, and we asked the Genesis Project, which is I'm obviously involved in deeply, to grant about 30 ETH worth of native Lootverse assets plus actual ETH to this public goods initiative. 50 Genesis mana, which I think is trading at like 0.15, 0.2 ETH, plus 20 ETH of actual cold hard ETH given out as a no strings attached grant to this initiative. And it has passed, which is awesome. I think it closes in a couple hours, but it's at like, I don't know, the stat here is like 98% yes or something like that, which is great to see. So the Genesis Project will be the first one to say, yes, thou mayest, let's go do this thing. Next, again, like I said, we're going to bring this to Divine DAO, we're going to bring this to Realms, and then soon we'll be bringing this to Loot DAO too, to say, let's go and take some Lootverse native assets, like Lords, like Divine, like Genesis Mana, but also like ETH, and let's use that to give no strings attached creative grants to writers both from within the community, but also to writers who maybe don't know about Loot, but who are up-and-coming fantasy writers, who are I don't know where I can find this, but up-and-coming fantasy writers, maybe even like professional fantasy writers. Imagine you get someone like Patrick Rothfuss or Brandon Sanderson to say, yeah, this sounds exciting. Maybe I'll spend a couple weekends writing some short stories of loot that emerge from the loot canon, and if you're going to pay my agent for me to do that, sounds great. From my standpoint, that would just be a dream come true. If we could get some of these sort of legendary fantasy authors to get loot sniped the way that we have been loot sniped and to help us bring this Lootverse to life, I think that would set us off on a pretty incredible path. But also, it's not just about external writers that we sort of bring into the community. It's also about taking a budget and saying, let's reward our community ourselves for bringing this Lootverse to life with stories and content. The current plan is like probably half of the budget or so will go to a few hand-picked, deep, specific writers to write specific stories. And then the other half will be used likely for sort of community initiatives. I know Loot Hero and Cam have a pretty awesome vision for this. We can come around, and when we're ready to do the actual Loot DAO proposal itself, maybe we can rehash this and present it in a formal way. But actually, I see you on here, Loot Hero. Do you want to speak a little bit about your vision for how the process might work here?
Yeah, I'm outside on speaker. How's the audio, Michelle?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. I think we're just trying to frame it very similar to what the Crypt did. So, we have a prize. We define a set of rules. Like for the Crypts, they had the Fire Relic. I think for ours, we would provide a little bit more foundational elements that all the stories have to bind to. But then we would open it up for voting. So all of the projects contributing to the Genesis Scrolls would get a vote. So 8,000 rounds, 8,000 loot bags, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would kind of use the Get Grants model of, based on how many votes every entry gets, we split up the amount of rewards we have and distribute it to the writers. And then there's kind of the potential for additional rounds as well, but that's a bit more complicated, so I'll just leave it at the surface for now.
Cool, perfect. And yeah, we will come back around and do a, formal proposal to the Loot DAO itself and the Loot holders to say, hey, we're going to go do this whether Loot wants to support or not, but ideally the Loot DAO and the Loot holders say, hell yeah, this is incredible. Let's go work together to bring the Lootverse to life. So when we come present that, I think Loot Hero and Cam can both sort of lead that presentation and talk about the timeline like I have on the screen here, but the process, the team, the guiding principles. I said this is a medium-sized project. I want to call it a small project because, like Threep said, I want to make a small promise and over-deliver. This could end up being a hugely valuable project. If we can create content that's narrative content and a book of poems and a book of short stories and character sketches and real lore, not just a couple of sentences, but real stories with character development and conflict and resolution and excitement and characters that we want to follow along with, that feels to me like the beginning of the next era of Loot. The next era of Loot truly coming to life as this multimedia, decentralized world that we're all building together. So this is my public goods initiative for the Loot community around this concept of bringing the Lootverse to life with stories and content. And we've got a team of folks who are involved helping here. We've got sort of a steering committee that's 6, 7, 8 of us working out of the Divine DAO Discord. We've got a set of advisors who are bouncing around ideas and helping with lore and helping with process and ideas. We've got the beginnings of a set of creators. And then, like I said, obviously, anyone in the Lootverse can help here. The other thing that I wanted to call out here that maybe not was clear is that we're going to be formally requesting what adds up to about 100 ETH from these 4 core projects, Genesis, Divine, Loot, and Realms. But we also are really excited about the idea of the wider Lootverse, banners, explorers, crypts, crystals, loot punks, rings, more, saying, I want to help. And maybe I don't have ETH to throw into this treasury, but I want to help. Maybe I want to put a few Crypts and Caverns in as rewards for people who are bringing things to life. Maybe I want to put some banners in Maybe we want to put some of the relics from the crypt into this sort of public goods treasury to help do this. So zero pressure, and also zero promises. This is pure, no strings attached public goods. So the thing that Loot will get out of this is an exciting set of stories, but it's not like, if you give me this, I will give you that. Really, this is free, no strings attached CCO creative grants that we want to give out to the world. But it feels very Loot and feels very within our vibes and our values to say for anybody, Loot holders too and fans of the Lootverse, if anyone wants to donate into this pot, the goal of it will be to bring the Lootverse to life, starting with stories and artifacts from the Genesis era, and then if this experiment works, expanding this concept out to the wider edges of the Loot timeline. Before I share my next thing, comments or questions on this is the first time that I guess I'm presenting this to the wider crew. The Genesis ecosystem knows that I've been excited about this for months now, as does the Divine DAO ecosystem. But for anyone who this is new to, any questions? I did my best to explain this, but it's obviously a lot of words. Questions or reactions or plus ones, thumbs ups, it's all this.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of artist friends that if I showed them that, they'd lose their minds. The idea that you'd be able to just like get a grant to make like art in this world is really amazing. So I think this is, I'm like really hyped about this. Thank you.
Sweet. Any other feedback or reactions to this? Any feedback you give now, we can weave into the actual formal proposal that we bring to Loot. Moto says +1, nice.
Yeah, we're getting some +1s in the comments. +1.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I'm really excited about this. I'm a fantasy sci-fi geek. I'm less of a fantasy gamer, and sometimes I feel like I've got imposter syndrome here because everyone knows so much about the deep world of games. Hell, I haven't even ever really truly played Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm sitting in a library right now full of fantasy books and sci-fi books, and so that's the gift that I can give to the ecosystem, is bringing the stories to life, bringing the characters to life, creating conflict, creating stories that you just want to tune into, read, pick up, and uniquely in the Lootverse, not just read, but also participate in the creation of. So I know I get a lot of energy from that, and I'm excited to help bring this to life. Okay, sweet. So I'm going to keep the mic for a second here, because that was the first thing I wanted to share. The second thing I wanted to share is related, but it's really a broader public good for the Lootverse. So it's related in this way. I'll draw the tie this way. If we're going to give out a bunch of free, no-strings-attached creative grants to writers, content creators, artists to help bring the Lootverse to life, what we're not saying is go make fantasy stuff. Like, here's an example of a loot bag. Go do whatever comes to mind. Just make a fantasy story. What we are saying is, hey guys, the Lootverse is a thing. The Lootverse is not just random white text on a black background. The Lootverse has structure. The Lootverse has item rankings. The Lootverse has 16 orders. The Lootverse has canonical connections between sort of lore A, lore B, lore C, if anybody knows about that. The Lootverse has, again, sort of structure and scaffolding. It even has an implied timeline that we're working off of. So if you're going to go create content within the Lootverse, build it within the Lootverse. Again, don't just make random fantasy content. Do it in a way that builds up from the Loot contract. Do it in a way that brings the Loot contract to life and brings the Lootverse to life, brings the realms to life, brings the Crypts and Caverns to life, brings the Genesis Adventure story to life. And so to help people do that, and to help people understand, like, what is the Lootverse versus maybe what is not the Lootverse, as in, like, Dope Wars was an amazing fork of Loot. It's incredible, but it's not the Lootverse. Magic Treasure is amazing and has been incredibly successful and forked away from Loot very early. Said we're going to copy this sort of Loot primitive concept, be inspired by it, and go build a separate ecosystem. And they've built Bridge World, their whole different ecosystem, which is amazing and wildly successful right now. But it's not the Lootverse. It's inspired by Loot, but it's not really connected at all to like Loot itself. Loot, again, having item rankings and character classes and orders and scaffolding in the contract. And so what I have been working on quietly for a while is a canonical guidebook to help people understand what is the Lootverse and how can I expand on it. Both at a high level, but also like way in the weeds, the details, for creators, for builders, for designers, for storytellers, even for artists. This is a place to go to say, I want to understand and learn about Loot, and I want to weave into the Lootverse. It's also a place to go for someone to say, I'm going to write a story about Loot, and I don't want to accidentally contradict the foundational physics of this universe. Like, if I'm going to write a story into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you probably should watch some of the movies first and read some of the forums. You know, if you're going to write a story about Spider-Man, you don't just look at a picture of this red superhero and then write a story. You read about him and you understand the backstory, and you understand the foundational like physics of that universe. And so this is similar. If you want to build inside the Lootverse, come join the Lootverse and learn about the Lootverse. And this place, Loot.Foundation, is unofficial, because nothing in Loot can be official. And this is maybe my take on it, so I'll caveat it with that. And in some ways, the Lootverse itself, Peter Watts said this, and I thought this was pretty prescient, the Lootverse itself is a extension of Loot. The Lootverse itself is a fork of Loot in some ways. Like, the Lootverse TM, or the Lootverse CCO, is its own concept, and this page, Loot.Foundation, and what I'm about to show underneath it, is the scaffolding and the facts and the principles and the stories and the bones of that Lootverse. So Loot.Foundation is public, and from here it provides a canonical foundation for this infinitely expansive universe. It provides things like the principles hidden inside the Loot contract. It provides a suggested, what I call meta timeline for the Lootverse. It provides community canon, and it wraps it all up in a concept that Loot Hero coined, which is the first time anyone in human history has said these three words together, a lore development kit. If you go to Google and you search for lore development kit, up until yesterday, that phrase didn't even exist in the universe. And Loot Hero, you get credit for naming that and framing that. I think it's incredible. It's like an SDK, but for lore development. An SDK to say, here's the principles you can run with. Some of the guidelines, some of the facts, some of the threads you can pull on. And as a community, we've built this LDK over the course of months, but it's lived kind of in like Discord forums and in our heads and in our individual projects and in Google Docs and just all around the place. This now has been organized in a way that's incredibly structured. So I'm going to open up the next page here. I think from here you can just click Start Here now. This is the first LDK for Loot, and maybe the first LDK ever. We're calling it Loot.Foundation. I like that because it's a double entendre here. Foundation as in it is the baseline for us to go build a world on, but also foundation in that this is a public good. And the spirit here and the intention here is to be a foundation that almost can also like steward and shepherd and support and guide the Lootverse in a positive way. So, like I said, it's designed for builders and developers and storytellers who want to build this cohesive Lootverse together. My principle here being that if we can develop on top of this unified foundation, and we have a set of shared physics and core principles, we can build a cohesive universe that's connected to each other, that we collectively can enrich and advance each other's projects, as opposed to random fantasy stuff that's unconnected to each other and just sort of devolves into like fantasy stuff on the internet. I love fantasy stuff, but a bunch of random fantasy stuff doesn't come together as a cohesive universe. I'm compelled to, as you guys know, create order and structure and find scaffolding, and in some ways find hidden scaffolding. And the gift of Loot is that inside of the Loot contract, there is some hidden scaffolding. So this site starts at like L0 and then builds up from there, meaning it starts with like the canonical principles of loot that are inside the contract. The like revelations that we had around item types, that there's weapons that fit into different materials and classes and weights, that it's got character classes, and those character classes are broken out into multiple categories. We call them warriors, hunters, and mages, but that's a version of community canon. It's got the item power rankings inside of this, the idea that inside of each inside of each character class, there's a set of canonical like power levels or power rankings of the specific items. It's got the definitions of the 16 orders, and it susses that out so that people can make sense of this. It's got a story around greatness and how greatness works. Greatness from 0 to 14 is one thing, from 15 to 18 gets an order, etc., etc. It talks about the name prefixes, what they are, where they came from, what they imply, what we know and what we don't know about them. It also provides the foundational building blocks of the realms, the resources, the wonders, the map of the Lootverse. And then it builds up to create essentially the first LDK. And that first LDK has a set of sort of fundamentals. Fundamentals like a simple question like, what is loot? Loot obviously is white text on a black background, sure, but what is loot? Example, loot is a set of gear worn by adventurers, but a loot bag itself does not equal an adventurer. The loot bag is the items and gear carried by an adventurer, and so you can decouple those things out. It's got explanations about who we are in this world, where loot came from, what's an adventurer, and then it's even got a timeline of before Genesis, Age of Exploration, the Mist, the Age of Adventure, and then a pretty deep sort of story about what each of these things are that's specific enough for it to be cohesive, but broad enough to create space for infinite creative stories inside of this. And this will continue to be worked on a bit. The core contributors here are myself and Loot Hero, but a huge thanks to the wider Loot ecosystem. Everybody has participated in discovering these facts and coming together with this sort of canonical timeline. So this isn't, I'd say that the site is collated and created and shepherded forward by myself and Loot Hero, but it's an amalgamation of sort of the collective brain of the Lootverse. It's got some story seeds, some places, some characters, etc. It will also start to help to breathe some life into the borders. This is being done inside the Realms Discord in partnership with me and with other folks to really bring the orders to life. Like, what is the Order of Power? What's the culture about? What are the wonders of the power? What are the notable Genesis adventures of power? So, again, as like story seeds for creators and writers who want to come in, it's not just, here's a bunch of fantasy words, go crazy, but it's welcome to our world, here's how it works. And a lot of our world, just like the human world, is that we don't know how everything works. We don't know all the answers. We don't know all of the history. We don't know all the physics yet. For example, like the item names, the prefixes, there's still a lot of debate as to what do those even mean? Demon, peak, bender, bite, etc. So what we can do is present the facts and present the structure, but also leave a ton of room for interpretation, just like humanity. I mean, we all thought the world was flat a couple of hundred years ago. Somebody on the call the other day said, we still don't even know where the pyramids came from, which really blew my mind, because how is that possible that we don't know where the pyramids came from? So similar parallel to humanity, we know a ton about the Lootverse, but we also know there's a ton of known unknowns about the Lootverse. And as creators and writers and artists and others come along, they'll shed light on the unknown unknowns, things that we hadn't even thought of that really help bring this to life. I'll end on one specific thought here that's really crystallized in my mind over the past couple of days even. This is pretty specific, but it also feels super expansive and exciting. That when you think about the story of Loot, we've thrown out this timeline, and this timeline is like Genesis to this exploration age, to the Mist, where things are quiet with desolation across the realms, to the Age of Adventure, which is now. And something that's so powerful to me about this story is that it reflects the reality of what we, as in we on this actual call, and we, for the past 5 months, 6 months, have actually been doing with our real time in real life. We've been finding bags of loot. We've been learning about the bags. We've been trading them and cherishing them and protecting them. This learning has led to an epiphany, and driven by that epiphany, we, both in the Lootverse lore but also in real life, are working together to build this better world. We're like quite literally doing world building together. And each cycle of loot, as we think about the meaning of OG loot, the meaning of M loot, the meaning of Genesis loot, and the implied timeline around it, while it does create infinite space for like a million different interpretations, what I wanted to do here was present a pretty, what I think is compelling interpretation of the canonical timeline of the Lootverse. And that canonical timeline is a story of cycles. And it's a story of iterative learning through cycles, a story of discovery and action and collaborative world building that happens across thousands of generations and millions of adventures and tons of creative space. And that so far there have been 3 cycles of loot, and we're in the 3rd known cycle. What do I mean by that? The Genesis era was the first cycle of loot. And I'm not going to get into every detail, but in the Genesis era, the community, the people of the realms found bags of Genesis loot. They learned about the bags. They traded them. They protected them. They had an epiphany about the orders, and the orders then helped shape the land and shape society. Then something happened. We don't know what happened. And it's me, Lou, Will, nice. We don't know what happened, but something happened such that the cycle had to start again. So a major conflict, maybe the Genesis adventurers had a major conflict that the world was going to end, and they saved the world, went back to the realms and started to build. Then the next cycle happened, the next cycle being this age of exploration in which tons of loot bags were discovered again. And again, we found bags of loot. We learned about the bags. We traded, cherished, protected them. That learning led to an epiphany, and a society was born through exploration and adventure. But then we know something happened, and bags were just left in the dust, waiting for us on August 27th, 2021, to find them in the mist, to find them on Etherscan, to mint them and discover them. And the 3rd cycle began again. And that 3rd cycle is both a lore cycle, but also like a very human cycle that reflects the reality of what's happening here. We found a bunch of bags of loot. We said, what are these bags? And we started to learn about them. We traded the hell out of them. We cherished them. We protected them. We put them away in the vaults. And through the learning and through collaborative learning together, through individual people and groups and teams, we discovered this incredible epiphany about loot, that there is structure, that inside loot, as defined here in these canonical principles, there are item types, there's character classes, there's Genesis adventures implied by this, there's power rankings, there's orders, there's greatness, there's prefixes, and the prefixes come in groups of 3 sets. Through that epiphany, we've been working together to build the Lootverse, quite literally to build all these projects together and weave them together. And as we start to open the doors to this next chapter, this chapter of adventure, we're starting to use the loot bags. We're starting to use them to raid crypts. We're starting to use them to do pillaging and settling. We're starting to use them to maybe time travel into the world of HyperLoot. We're starting to truly use these bags to mint crystals and to level crystals. There's so many different things that are going to start to happen now. We're in a cycle of loot, and we're living it right now, both in the lore, but also in reality. There's way more specifics in this document. Obviously, what I just shared is pretty specific, but there's way more specifics here in terms of bringing that to life with a little bit more canonical connections to the loot contract. But I want to share that, even though maybe you're like, what the hell is Tipsdale talking about? If this resonated to you, I'd be honored if you sent me a DM or just popped in chat and said, hey, this made sense, or maybe this didn't make sense, because I feel like this can be a foundation for an epic story of the Lootverse. A story of cycles, a story of iterative learning, a story of collaboration and discovery and exploration and adventure together. And it's a story that is both born from the loot contract, which to me has been my religion for the past 6 months. Like, what can we pull from the loot contract? So not only is it born from the loot contract, it's also happening in actual real life. It's what we're doing on this call. It's what we're doing in Discords. It's what we're doing as we build together. And that story of loot, of cycles and iterative learning, we're in that third cycle now, and we are part of the story of loot. Loot is not some game on the outside that we click some buttons and fight with katanas and swords. This is the story of loot, and this is the world that we're building, and that meta story, we are actually all part of it. To me, that's really empowering. It's really exciting, and it's completely fresh and new. And I think Loot deserves something like that. We are doing the first decentralized world building that's semi-pseudonymous and asynchronous and global, and just like a complete new mental model for what it means to do world building. And so to build our own selves and our own story into that just feels appropriate, and it feels right. And again, because it's born, at least in my mind, out of the core canonical principles of the contract, it just feels like it fits. So that is what I've got. That is a ton. And I told you that's big thoughts, but also big geek thoughts here. Big loot geek thoughts. But what I hope this can become is for projects like the Genesis Scrolls, but also for everything in the Lootverse. For Loot Explorers as that game unfolds, as Realms and the Pillaging, Settling game unfolds, as the unknown projects emerge from the woodwork. Every week someone says, hey, by the way, I've been working on a loot project for 2 months. Can I share it? The goal here is to say, like, welcome to the Lootverse. Here's how we believe things work. And you don't have to adhere to these principles. Loot is open to anyone to do anything. But if you'd like to advance this vision of the Lootverse, if you'd like to advance with us and weave with us and grow with us, here's how we think about this world. Thou mayest join us. Like, come join this world, advance it with us. And hell, if you discover something that you feel like fundamentally changes some sort of conception that we've had about our past or about the reality and the physics of this world, well, just like humanity, let's change a little bit of history, and let's discover some new things, and let's find new meaning in things that we once thought to be true. And so this is not like 10 Commandments set in stone, never to be changed. This is the current conception of the Lootverse, described in a way that hopefully is helpful, structured, and open, opinionated, but also open, so that anybody can grok it, and anybody can build on top of it. And that is what I've got here. Hopefully this resonates.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for putting this down. I mean, this description of the cycles is so important, especially the current one. Anytime I get close to like rocking it, I get chills down my back because it's really important to understand the meta of how real the Lootverse is and how we are active participants in it, and all these things that are happening outside of the world in the blockchain are the real things that are happening in the Lootverse. And it's an important concept that I think we can get more people to get on board and understand it. It'll be really inspiring for everyone. So I appreciate you putting the time into it.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love your description of this of like pop goods. I feel like a lot of this is very much like urban planning, for this kind of like civilization. And on that idea of public goods gave me an idea that could possibly work here. I feel like it'd be cool if the Lootverse had like subway. I don't know if that already exists, but like some kind of map that allowed someone in like 2 seconds to visualize all the kind of like branching paths for this, cohesive emergent universe. So I just thought I'd toss that idea out there if anyone wants to pick it up. But yeah, love this. This is so cool. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for saying that. One request I might make here actually is I've pushed my limits here. I'm not a designer. I'm not even really a writer. Definitely not a web dev. But I've been pushing my limits here to make this work. If anybody can help like improve this, please do. This is built on Gitbook, and so we can add our own code, we can add our own imagery, even just some UX, UI stuff. I've done my best here, and we've had a group of people who've really helped think through this. But if somebody wants to help, this is a public good. This is not just like a document on my computer. You can actually like put in merge requests. If anybody wants to help here, I can add your email to the Gitbook, and then you can do like proper merge requests inside the structure. Plus, even just like some art and things, I think would help bring this to life. Again, have done my best, but this is just V1 of this. So yeah, I mean, honestly, even some art might help bring this to life. Any other like thoughts or reactions or requests or just feedback on this?
I'm wondering about something. Because when I hear everything that you worked on, I would like to contribute a little bit, and I'm sure many people would like to. And I'm wondering, would it be possible to make like a big dashboard with lots of little tasks that anyone could do, like work a little bit each day, or I don't know, just anything where anyone could contribute, so that we all expand the Lootverse together. Do you think that would be like realistically doable, or
I love that.
How could we all contribute as a small person, not having a lot of time but just wanting to contribute?
I love that, and actually, I don't know if the Rambling Boy is on. I think you probably are. He and I were talking about trying to create some sort of, I don't know, maybe he's not, some sort of like to-do list or task list or punch list that's like a community-wide board of like stuff that we're hoping to improve, both for this Loot.Foundation, but also just for Loot overall. I mean, Loot itself hasn't really done much in terms of coordinated action. It's been sort of in the Loot itself has been kind of like DAO paralysis mode, while the Lootverse has exploded. But there are a couple things within like just Loot itself that I think would really help build a stronger foundation for Loot. So yeah, we are talking about, I guess, two things. One, building like a Loot steering committee / a Loot board of sorts, who finally could be empowered to do things to improve Loot. Could be empowered to take actions, and even just some basic stuff like Twitter and the website and the Discord and more. And that group could also be empowered to help sort of create and curate this ongoing punch list. Until we do that, though, I guess because this is unofficial, Loot.Foundation, I just made this up, bought the domain name, said this is my vision of the Lootverse. I feel autonomous power to be able to suggest changes and actions and to-dos here. So I'll take that suggestion, DSI, and Rambling Boy and I can just add that to here. Like maybe we can have a section called like, get involved. It's not just like join Discord, but here are the 10, 15, 20 small and medium-sized things we need help with. From like, hey, we need some art for this page. We need someone to do some copy editing for this. We need somebody to bring each of these project pages to life, et cetera, et cetera. I'll take you up on that idea, and I think I'll probably add it right here. I'll add a new section underneath Get Involved. It's like stuff that everyone can help with. So, long answer to your short question, but the short answer is yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, Tim, we're at about an hour 40 minutes. I have to jump off in like 10 minutes. I think what else do we have anything else on the agenda formally? I know.
I want to have Glaciolak share something that's across the Hyperverse, and maybe other people want to share too. So I stopped sharing my screen. I'll turn off my mic. But yeah, thanks for keeping us on track here. Glaciolak, do you want to present what you had tried to present last week?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I have one tiny thing and then one kind of like hyper related thing. Yeah, so let me share. Hold on a second.
And remind us how to say your name.
Glossolaliac. glossolalia is like speaking in tongues. You know, when someone gets in front of like a church pew and just starts like spewing random syllables. Yeah. So I guess a glossolalia is someone who does that compulsively. Okay. So this fits. Can you guys see this like mood thing on Figma on my screen share?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll introduce this very shortly because I know we're running on time. But this kind of, I guess, fits into the Loot.Foundation thing of public goods. I thought it'd be great to kind of like have a public good for just like sharing inspirations. So visual inspirations, sonic inspirations, and just have like a very kind of frictionless way of contributing to the cosmic vision of Loot. So I have this one divided into four different, cosmic eras of Loot: the pre-Genesis era, the Genesis era, and the Conflict, the Age of the Mist, and the Great Adventure. Just anytime you could come across an artwork or a sound that's like, man, that really sounds like, the Age of the Mist, just like, plop it in here. And that way, for artists that are kind of being onboarded into Loot, they can have like a way of like kind of visualizing an aesthetic for each of these ages, carving out their little niche, and then just like immediately contributing, because it's really easy to just like, throw a bunch of artworks together for an age without having to, read a ton of lore and all that. So that is this tiny little thing. If you guys have any thoughts, I'm happy to hear them. And then I'm going to go into the Hyperverse thing. Okay, cool. Great. Yeah, so I'll put that in my bio and then maybe the Loot.Foundation website. Okay, so the second thing I am going to share is a spiritual derivative of Loot. It's called the Emergent Art Manifesto. It's kind of a weird idea, so I'm going to kind of quickly backtrack into the idea for a bit, as fast as possible. So, yeah, when Loot was dropped, it blew my goddamn mind. And it struck me that, this new technology of general-purpose blockchains had enabled not just like a new kind of way of making things, like new content, but like a new art form, right? Like the same way that a camera gives us the art form of photography, or a motion picture camera gives us filmmaking, that general-purpose blockchains have given us link. So I began to think, well, what the hell is this thing? And around that time, I was really into complex systems, and particularly the idea of emergence. Emergence is when, from the interactions between parts in a system, a complex whole arises that has like properties that you can't find in the individual parts, right? So, you have like one ant and you separate it from a colony, and it's extremely dumb. It like crawls around in circles and dies. But if you have an ant in collaboration with a bunch of other ants, they build these like an anthill of unfathomable complexity. Or take Loot. I might get my history wrong here, but this is a good way of visualizing emergence. You have the original contract, and then from that original contract, emerges realms, and then from the connection between realms and the original contract, you have adventure goals, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This kind of like emergent structure builds itself from the bottom up. This is at DeFi protocols, which is also a great visualization of emergence. So the other fact about it is that when we build these primitives, we build them for things to emerge from them. So it made me think that, like, whoa, maybe this new art form is emergent art. And that was a pretty big, weird idea. So I began to think, well, damn, like we got to bring more people to the Lootverse and the Hyperverse. Like, how can I share this idea with the world? And I thought, it needs a manifesto. But it didn't make any sense because I can't write that manifesto. This thing is built and defined by its community. So then with my friend Max, who's a great designer, we began to discuss and maybe figured out a way that we could have, a manifesto for this art form that belonged to and emerged from the community. So that's where the idea of the Emergent Art Manifesto came in. So I'm going to let Max just screen share that and explain it to all of you. Hold on a sec. Okay. Could you also disconnect your... Yeah. Hi, everybody. Max here. I don't know if you can see... You still see the Fig Jam board there?
Hey, Max. Yeah, we still see the mood board.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna... Let's see here. Yeah, I'm just gonna... Gloss, where's the... oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm just gonna enter a new URL. Do you see this? This spare page?
Yep, 4 to 2, 3 to 0.
Great. Okay, so this is the implementation of this idea. So each one of these are individual manifestos that anyone can create. So this is actually an NFT project where it starts with this original manifesto that Glossy will write or is writing, and then what you can do is you can actually write your own version of a manifesto, and then as a branch of any other one. So every manifesto comes from another one, and then you can mint that. And there can be an unlimited number of manifestos, but you're only allowed one per, and I can get into why that is later. So if you click on one of the manifestos, it'll look something like this. Like, this is just a sample thing. This isn't actually what it is, but it would look like this. Say who it's written by, see where all of them are branched from, and then on any manifesto you can branch it just like that. And then it'll just explain what happens. But again, it'll be a permanent branch of it, and then anyone will be able to branch it. You can edit here. It's only going to be basically plain text. Like, it would be saved as plain text wrapped in like p tags, like paragraph tags. So no styling, no anything. Any styling that someone would paste in from here would get stripped, just to keep it really, really simple and also just easier to manage. And then if you go to mint it, you can connect the wallet, all of that, scroll through here, and this would be for slippage fees. And then when you pay, it would mint it, right? And now your manifesto would be the next number that it is. So now there are 5 manifestos. You minted the 5th one. Now that it's 5, and then you can see your manifesto like that, or you can just go back, and now it's a part of it. So that's the idea of the whole thing. And I'm sure most of you are looking at this and saying, well, hey, this is great. When's it going to be designed? Or who's your designer? Well, this is actually what the final implementation would look like. And the reason why is we designed this very specifically to feel as unfinished as possible and to feel as raw as possible. Because I basically want a designer to come to this website, because all of the front end code will be open source, and then someone could just take it and be like, this looks super ugly, or some people could think it's beautiful, and then they can make their own front end and then just call the contracts from there, or there's a lot of different possibilities. I don't want to define what all of the possibilities would be, because I'd want other people to figure that out. But it's this idea that not only can people make their own manifestos from this and then contribute to their own idea of what emergent art is, but they can just take this whole implementation and make it their own. And the idea here, the meta idea of emergent art, is that not only are each of these manifestos a piece of emergent art because it came out of the original seed manifesto, or whichever one it did, but that all of this together is one piece of emergent art, or is one emergent artwork. And that's why this page would just be called the Emergent Art Manifesto when I set up the URL for all of it.
But that's like the basics of it. I know there's a good, so if anyone has questions about how it works or like technical details, then we're happy to answer questions about it. There are some open questions on like the technical side, the back end of it, for like the smart contract implementation. But that's something that we're looking to get help with. But yeah, that's the basics of it. Plus, do you have any other ideas about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's as we dove more into it, we realized that there are a lot of abilities, things people could build, or ways they could compose the manifesto. So I'll just say that we optimize composability and just kind of create a way that the ideas about this art form that we're building could, kind of like be an organic origins. So I will leave it there for now. Yeah.
Really cool. Excited to see this come to life. And on the first thing you share at the mood board, let me know when you're feeling good about that. We can add it to Loot.Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have you shared a link to this?
I have not, no.
Okay.
I will do that, yeah.
Yeah, share it in general if that's cool. I would love to just kind of like dig in a little more.
Yeah, totally.
Andrew, before we wrap, maybe in 3 minutes, Ian can share the really cool stuff that Autonomy has been working on with the meta dungeon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would be cool. Thank you. I appreciate that, Tim. I'll try and go quick.
I know I promised not 2 hours, but all of a sudden we're in 2 hours.
So in 3 minutes. So just to give you guys some background, Autonomy Network is a protocol. Check it out at autonomynetwork.io. But it's basically a set of technical protocols that enable kind of unexpected automation across the blockchain. And essentially you can think about that as like a network of bots that let you kind of automate different interactions through kind of on-chain conditional execution. So like, think of things like setting stop losses and limit orders to dexes. And while that's not really related at all, like one space I think that we immediately identified was NFTs. The question was how we could use the protocol as kind of a building block for NFT projects and create more kind of functionality inside of NFTs. So think about that as like, how can we create real kind of like the environments? How can we create sentient NPCs? I think that was a big question for us. What we realized was that using Autonomy, we could create these NFTs that actually like autonomously transfer themselves in and out of someone's wallet, which we think is kind of like novel and super interesting. And they're completely sentient and you can't transfer it. But for example, like we can create a dragon that makes its own decisions and that flies between different wallets across the blockchain. And so, of course, the possibilities are endless. Like, you can add these autonomous NPCs to realms. You can create these totally unique interactions. Because Autonomy allows smart contracts to essentially make their own transactions and become autonomous, people can now create NPCs that interact with the user or other NPCs without the user to do anything. So, I think working with the community, like, definitely going back and forth with Tim a lot, like, I think our idea was, like, let's take this approach of creating this, like, simple, minimum viable product. And in this case, that's what we're calling the meta dungeon, where we're creating the first ever autonomous NPC game with this like ANFT, which is a dragon. And our idea here, and the key of this dungeon, is to just show a demo of how an ANFT can be set to autonomously transfer itself to someone's wallet, and how we can kind of create gameplay around this dungeon. So how does this work? So the way that it works is basically anyone can mint a hero, which is totally free, and we're not doing this for money. From those wallets that we have where you mint a hero, we now have the addresses where our dragon can go visit. So like every day, this dragon is going to fly into a different wallet across the blockchain and pays for its own gas, and so it's going to fly to different wallets. And when the dragon is in your wallet, you can go to the site and you can actually fight the dragon. And of course, when you think about that, like dragon transferring itself every day means only one person for 365 days. Like in a year, you're only going to get 365, which is not a lot. So we also added this ability to be able to summon this dragon, so every day you're paired with another hero through Twitter, and you can join together, and you can summon the dragon, and you can go and fight it. Of course, like right now, this is like a really simple interaction. Like, it's a dice roll against the dragon, and if you win what's in the treasure chest, so like tokens and like custom NFTs and other dead heroes who have been slain. We also have this function where you can use an NFT, like for example, Loot, to summon this dragon. So again, it's a really it's a super simple example of, I think, one, what we think is cool, which is this idea of autonomous NFTs and the idea of characters that can transfer themselves into different wallets. And I think how much interaction and world building and kind of characters you can create, where someone or your wallet is kind of the center of the universe, and you can have so many different characters that can come and interact in really unique ways. And also kind of giving this experience where you can kind of see that it's this is a very small thing. This is just the first meta dungeon. It's a pretty simple interaction. You fight this dragon. It's almost like a dice roll. If you win, you get different objects. But I think we see this as kind of a building block and hopefully a piece of technology that's totally open. And our hope is that people will fork it and use it to create and bring interactivity to different worlds and adventures that they're building inside the Loot community. It's really just an idea of kind of creating a protocol that can be a building block for decentralized world building. So, super fast. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. I'll drop a Medium article that kind of explains exactly how the game works into the general chat. And also, I think because we think this pairs so well with all of the incredible storytelling and narrative and world building that's going on inside the Loot community, we wanted to open up the whitelist to mint the heroes for loot holders, or for people, honestly, just not even loot holders, people who are engaged in this community. So I'll drop that into, we have a bunch of whitelist spots, and I think we're trying to launch in the next kind of couple weeks. But, yeah, that's really the idea. Super fast, but hopefully that kind of covers some of it. I know some of you in here are a little bit more familiar with it, but that's it in 3 minutes.
Really cool. Can that dragon pay for all of my gas going forward too?
If only, man. If only.
It's really cool. It's awesome to see this come to life. I know you've been thinking deeply about this.
Yeah, and huge shout out definitely to you and other people inside this community who have helped us kind of focus this project throughout, and also introduce us to the incredible people here and also incredible people in Divine. Kind of building out this universe. It's been fucking awesome to see it, and just super happy to know that it's happening and be a part of it.
Amazing. Thank you.
Well,
thanks,
those are
man.
positive words to end on. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say thanks, and I shared your link in general.
Oh, awesome! Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And there's a few comments and ideas shared in there, but we don't have time, so maybe we can just take some of that discussion async.
For sure. And I would say, like I said, we're really hoping that people will fork, and we're totally open to anyone who wants to build kind of anything on it. Really just kind of giving an example of what can be done, but we think it can be super cool. We're really excited to launch.
Awesome stuff. All right, gang. That's all we got for you this morning. 2 hours, another marathon. But a lot of fun, exciting, great stuff. Thanks for everyone who came on and shared, put themselves out there. And thank you everyone for joining and participating. So much fun. Thanks everyone.